the poor, am I right? And I already hate everyone in this book. If less than 2 people die, I'm gonna be surprised. Okay, let's play Never Have I Ever. Never have I ever gone up in a hot air balloon. Never have I ever fallen asleep and fell off a toilet while drunk. Never have I ever read Wuthering Heights. Yeah, I can't drink to that. I don't have a big reason why, apart from it was never assigned to me during any of my studies, and therefore I never got around to it, even though through roll of the dice I was assigned Jane Eyre 3 times. And it's one of those ones that's always hung over me, something that people always reference, I've always been interested in, people that I trust like it, and I just thought, now there's a film coming out about Emily Bronte's life and how it differed from her sisters, and it stars Maeve from Sex Education, obviously I'm gonna have to see that, and I think that my experience of watching that film in a few weeks is gonna be significantly enhanced if I've read her most famous work. So I grabbed one of the 2 Wuthering Heights copies I own because I'm an optimistic book buyer and a pessimistic reader, and I thought I would get cracking. The only things I really knew about this book before getting into it was the main characters' names, Heathcliff and Cathy. One of my aversions in teenagehood, I'm now remembering to reading this book, is because I used to go by the name Cathy because my whole name's Kathleen, so everyone at school always used to sing this song at me, Cathy, oh come home. So that made me want to not read the book. So I know their names, and I know that it's major trage, and I know that it's set on the moors, and I know that it's moody as hell. That's it. I don't know any of the plot. I don't know if anyone dies, although this cryptic drawing on the inside of my copy is giving me vibes that somebody does. The only quote I know from it is this one on the back that I've heard read at weddings: whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same, which sounds very sweet, but I have feelings from previous experiences, probably not as romantic as it seems. And I thought whether you have or haven't read Wuthering Heights before, I would take you along for the journey. So here is the story of Lena Norms reading Wuthering Heights for the very first time. So I'm at Greenbelt Festival, it might not look like it, it's over there. It's day 2 of me reading along to this book, and I can tell you that last night I got to the grand total of 8 pages before falling asleep in my tent. I've got a little bit of time this afternoon, so I'm hoping to get a little bit further through, but my first shock, again an assumption that I didn't know that I was holding, was that I thought that the book would be narrated by a female character, or like from a female, over the shoulder of a female character. I guess because Jane Eyre was narrated that way and I was lumping all the Bronte bitches in the same little den, but it's not. It's narrated by this other man who is renting a cottage from Mr. Heathcliff, already grumpy, loving it, and that's frankly all I remember because I only got back to my tent at like 1 AM, so let's see how this little afternoon read along goes. Look, I told a lie. I told a lie. I have lies in my head and I let them out of my mouth. And I didn't realise that I was telling a lie at the time. But I feel like I really thought that I didn't have any these glasses aren't going in my hair, are they? I keep trying to make, come on. I really thought that I didn't have any expectations about this book. And I don't know if you've had this too, when you go in feeling like you don't have any expectations, and then it becomes clear quite rapidly that you in fact did have some expectations and they are not being met. While on the surface you want to be hyper aware that all 3 Bronte sisters are like different people writing in different ways, they are also, compared to all of the books that have stood the test of time and actually survived long enough to be available at my Waterstones, some of the only women writing during this period, and they were all living in a very specific town, in a very specific society, and as unexperimental as the form of the novel was back then, you would kind of assume that they would be similar. Now, obviously there are lots of things around language that are quite similar because they're writing books set generally during their time, but here are some things that I was surprised, I was disappointed not to find. A linear narrative. Look, if I'm going to be reading old words and grasping a family tree that makes less sense than the Coventry Ring Road, I'm gonna need at least a timeline that stays put. I knew that this wasn't gonna be a romance. No, that's not true. I knew that there was a love story in it, but I knew it wasn't going to be an idyllic romance. However, I'm on page 78 and I already hate everyone in this book. Everyone, with no exception. I know that a lot of books aren't there to have lovable characters, and I actually think that's a fault of a lot of readers expecting lovable characters, but I was at least expecting some of them to be nice. None of them are nice. Jane Eyre is your every woman. She's blank to a certain extent, but also, you know, incredibly pure in some ways, endures a lot of stuff. None of these characters are blank. They wear their trauma on the outside. In fact, I actually found a graph in The Guardian of the amount of assaults in the book, and you can see that most people are both perpetrators and victims. From the offset, Heathcliff, incredibly unpleasant, and not in a sexy way. Don't look at me like that. You know that there's a way in 19th century novels that men can be unpleasant in a sexy way. I don't want it to be true, but here we are. And also there's this famous quote from the book: whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And at the moment, I'm not actually seeing that much of their romance. It's being reported, but I don't really feel like I'm getting invested in what's being reported. Heathcliff and Cathy have almost been like Jack and Jill when it comes to my cultural staples. Like, I know they're the couple from this book, and I know that they're perpetually unhappy. So I thought that the novel would follow them. And it kind of follows them, but so far it's feeling not as cohesive as that. It's told from an unreliable narrator who doesn't really seem to be part of the plot. He's a guy who rents one of the houses out from where the main plot did happen before. But he's unlikable. I don't even like him. I hate him, actually. And then we're getting some of the story from their servant. So it's very whisper, pass it on. And I'm feeling quite distant from all the characters at the moment. I'm not to say that I am hating it, but I definitely am struggling with it more than I have a lot of classic novels. And maybe that's because I haven't read a classic novel in a while. And obviously during my masters and my degree, I read quite a few of them. But I'm not like, every time I pick this book up, I'm not like zinging to go, you know? But deeds not words. I've got two solutions. One, I didn't know why I didn't know who all the characters were and why I kept losing the thread of who they were talking about. I was like, am I sleep deprived? Have I hit the menopause? What's going on? I feel like I'm tripping. But no, then I found this diagram that explains that in fact all the characters have the same frickin' names. Look at it. Just pause the video. Take a look at this. It's a mess. It's a mess. Everything in this book only has one of three surnames. They often share first names. One man has a surname as a first name and another surname as a second surname. One woman, Catherine, not to be confused with Catherine, don't even get me started, has had all of those three surnames at different points in her life. She has been Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Linton, and Catherine Heathcliff, which is of course obviously very different to the famous Cathy, who is known at certain points in the book as Catherine Linton and Catherine Earnshaw. Following? So here's my plan of action. I'm going to set aside 15 minutes solid just to stare at this diagram, just to stare at it. And then I'm going to restart the book because it's come to my attention that Amy from Sex Education, Northern Icon, has read the audiobook. So I'm going to get that and I'm going to let her explain it to me from the beginning while staring at this map. Why this isn't printed in every copy of Wuthering Heights seems like a publishing error, but I have faith. Look, there's also a graph here that shows that Wuthering Heights has sold collectively more than any other Brontë novel, and collectively there are more TV and film adaptations of Wuthering Heights in existence than all of Charlotte's novels combined. So I'm gonna keep going with the hypothesis that it's me, not you, Emily, and we're gonna keep trying because God loves a trier. God loves a trier. Okay, so I am 193 pages through this darned book, and I think we're starting to make friends. We're friends, aren't we? Eh? We're well past the point of no return. My DNF rules are usually, if I'm not enjoying it at all and I see no hope, by the time I get to the 100-page mark, I am allowed to do that. But I didn't feel that way when I got to the 100-page mark. I did feel like things were getting going, and to put it mildly, if you've already read the book, shit started kicking off. What I would say for this book is that it doesn't dwell on description or keep you held in one pen for too long. It's very much like Monkey Run when it comes to family drama. It's like poo 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 poo. I think I might even call it a da 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 pacey classic. So there's that. My issue at the moment with sinking into it is that it's not that the characters are unlikable, because I can deal, is that I feel, without further reading, that the characters are acting irrationally. Now, we all know that cruelty is irrational. It can't be justified, but it can sometimes be explained. And without me snooping on sparknotes.com, I wasn't really getting why Heathcliff was being the way that he was. Now, I understand that it's probably just through like straight up revenge, which isn't an incredibly complex motive for a character. Like, it's not a very complicated kind of revenge. He just kind of hates everybody he grew up with apart from Cathy, and he's just ready to be as evil as possible to them. I'm not that interested in Heathcliff as a character, but I am interested in various aspects of the book. So the adaptation I've got my eye on watching after I finish this is this one, and in this one they have cast Heathcliff as black, or as some of the articles are saying, mixed race. So what I found weird when I went online was that it seems that casting him that way was controversial, whereas somebody going into the book who only knew the names of the two main characters and didn't know anything about the plot or the context, it's been clear to me as a reader for most of it that he's not white. It's directly referenced quite a lot. I mean, this example on page 69, I've got something in my eye, I'm not crying because of the plot. It hasn't got me that deep yet. It says, "A good heart will help you to a bonny face, my lad," I continued. "If you were a regular black, and a bad one." And then it goes on to say, "You're fit for a prince in disguise. Who knows, but your father was an emperor of China and your mother an Indian queen, each of them able to buy up." It's suggesting that easily in disguise he could pass for the descendants of people from China or India. He's often referred to as a gypsy boy, which I recently learned is a phrase coined only a couple of 100 years before this book was written, because when Romany travellers came to Britain, people in Britain thought they looked Egyptian. So it's wild to me that all of these men were cast as Heathcliff before this man. But sure, I am getting more invested in the love between Cathy and Heathcliff, as much as I hate both of them. And I think that's possible, and the mark of clever writing, that you care about the love between two people you individually don't like. So really what's getting me through this is trying to work out what happens between them. You kind of get told in the first third, and thanks to this copy, on the flipping flap, thanks vintage, you do kind of get told how things pan out for them both. But I'm interested to see how that happens. At the moment, favourite character, Nellie, the ultimate shit-stirring servant. Total twat, but enjoyably so. I also think it's been helping me read the physical book with the audiobook, because all the chapters are quite short and everything in my audiobook is bookmarked correctly. I can just be like, right, okay, I'm on chapter 15, I'll play that in my audio while I'm assembling a trolley, which is what I did last night, or cooking or whatever. So I think the combined mediums are working for me for this, especially as I'm really out of practice with reading classics. And yeah, I still don't feel like this is ever gonna make it into my favorite books. Like, the language just isn't exciting me or making me feel the big feels, but there's still time, and I will give it that. Let's go. So if I was going to summarise this book in 6 words, it would be, Hell is Other People, the novel. You don't realise how small or how large your life is as a modern person until you read books like this and you see how low people's standards had to be to find friends or lovers. In fact, I looked a little bit more closely at this family tree, and the more you look at it, the more you think, what the fuck? And not only that, but I had another revelation. So when Heathcliff comes into their life, it is because Mr. Earnshaw goes on this trip, and before he goes, he asks his 2 children and Nellie, who at that point is kind of a foster child, but she will eventually turn into their servant because fuck the poor, am I right? He asks each of the children what he should bring back for them from the trip. Very reminiscent, I realised, and I'm probably not the first person to realise this because there's lots of scholarly stuff out there about Wuthering Heights, but I realised it really reminded me of the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, in that he asks each of his daughters what they'd like to bring back, and Belle simply asks for a rose. Catherine asks for a whip because she's kind of a violent child, I guess. Her brother asks for I don't really remember, it's not relevant, and Nellie asks for some fruit. Nothing of that comes back with their father, no, but Heathcliff does. Heathcliff, who will eventually turn into the beast of this fable. Okay, it started raining, what do I do? Do I stay? I'm British, I should stay outdoors. I'm gonna try. So Heathcliff is the beast of this book, and he is coded as not white, and also the trip that their father goes on and comes back with this vagrant Heathcliff is Liverpool. Liverpool being the main slavery port, so is Heathcliff the descendant of a former slave, and or is he of more significance than it is letting on? I don't know if they're going to tell us that in the last part of the book, but I'm like, Mr. Earnshaw he doesn't seem to be the most charitable man ever. He also doesn't seem to be against slavery and anything. He doesn't seem like he has like a particular skew towards adopting children and charity. So why did he bring back this specific child? Well, maybe it's his. Maybe it's his. And I was then reading an article and I realised that other people suspect that maybe it's his, which would make Cathy and Heathcliff siblings. So if they are siblings and Mr. Earnshaw had a salacious affair with somebody in Liverpool who was not white or potentially a slave, then this becomes even more complicated when Heathcliff is the bad guy. Apart from he's not the bad guy, if you really listen to what the narrator's saying, I think. He is definitely a monster. He's a horrific man. There's so much violence in this. A lot of it comes from him, but a lot of it was taught to him by his supposed guardians, the people in the world that were supposed to keep him safe. They treat him awfully as a child. The only person that treats him nicely is Cathy, even though she's super neurotic and annoying and kind of rude to him as well. He's rude back. There's no good guys, but it's also just like, if it was to be read as a fable, it would be like, see, this is why we shouldn't integrate race and class. But I don't think that's what Emily Brontë is saying. I think because all of the other characters are so blatantly horrific and there's loads of times where they could have fixed it and they didn't, I think this is more of a like, what if everybody within a 5-mile radius of where you were born is awful and you can't leave? I hope she's okay. How is Emily? I guess we'll find out in the film. Another thing that I thought about when I was thinking about why I started reading this book and the film that's going to come out, the kind of, I guess it's going to be a creative biopic, is that Kea Scudelario, I think I'm saying that surname right, it's a joyous surname, whatever it is. I'm just going to keep dry with this and carry on. So she was in the last adaptation of Wuthering Heights playing Cathy, and she had just become recently famous for her casting on Skins, and she was like the moody, alternative, sexy girl who stirs all the shit up. That was what she was famous for, and I'm guessing that's why they got to commission the film with such a high budget, because she was in it and at the time she was super famous. Is that not a massive parallel with Emma Mackey, who is like currently very famous for being the moody, sexy, slightly poverty-stricken girl who stirs shit up in sex education? And don't they look really similar as well? And do we only get Wuthering Heights adaptations or Emily Brontë justice when there's like a super attractive but alternative woman who is in between shooting for teen series and needs like an outlet? No? Is anybody else seeing that parallel, or am I imagining it? I'm probably imagining it. Let's march on with this bloody book. I'm not going to say I'm not enjoying it, but it would be weird to say I enjoyed it because it's such a depressing book. Emily, you okay? I'm presuming not. Let's see how this ends. I'm guessing it's a bloodbath. If less than 2 people die, I'm going to be surprised. So you and me, let's do this. So here we are. We're at the end of the journey, me and you, and what a journey It was. I finished reading this last night, and I do definitely feel like I have a bit of a book hangover this morning. Like, some books I read and they don't affect me at all, and I kind of forget that I've read them emotionally straight after I finish them. Maybe obviously I remember reading them, but you know what I mean. But with this, I definitely felt like there was a moment at the end of the book where I was like, wow, I've been on a journey, I'm at the end of the journey. So it definitely did affect me. As far as books go, I would say this is definitely one of the pacier classics that I've ever read. The language is quite dense, but the action is on every page. I do think the choice to not ever explain Heathcliff's history to any of us ever was something that was like an interesting choice, that she probably had a massive reason for it. I mean, this kind of idea of the other coming in to a small mean community and being shrouded in this mystery may be part of the point. And also I was reading about how she could have been implying that he was picked up from Liverpool because he was a slave or the son of a slave, or he was picked up from Liverpool because it's also a port where at that point a lot of Irish people were fleeing the Irish famine, so he could have been maybe Irish Romany, something like that. I think what was most intriguing about the book to think about was how nothing is told from first person. Everything is repeated through other characters. I read somebody calling it like a Russian doll of narratives where you pull them apart and there's a smaller one inside. You're always hearing from Mr. Lockwood, who is telling you what Nellie told him, and Nellie is telling you what Heathcliff told her. So the way the text is wrapped up and its structure is really unusual, really interesting for that time. But I think in general I am way more excited to hear about the life of Emily Brontë and her sisters in this film, and the kind of rivalry and the fucked upness and all of that. Like, I'm interested in the real person behind this book rather than the actual characters in the book itself. For me, I wouldn't say it was an enjoyable experience. I guess on some level it would be weird to say, for anyone to say that they enjoyed it, because it's such a cruel, violent, horrible book in a lot of ways to read. But it's also obviously a piece of literature, and literature isn't supposed to be cozy and comforting and idealistic all of the time. So that's not a criticism of it, but I think it would be weird if I had enjoyed reading it, you know? And I know that if I'd read this as a teenager, I might have romanticised Heathcliff and Cathy's relationship, and I've been around the block too many times to do that now. But maybe as a teenager I might have enjoyed it more, even if that was in an unhealthy way. But in general I was kind of like, it's definitely not one I'm going to reread. Even though my edition is beautiful, I don't know if I'm going to keep it. Like, I definitely didn't feel like I had a personal connection to the book, which is fine. I am, however, now very excited to see Maeve in the film. Have you read Wuthering Heights? Were you a fan? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know your favourite classic book, because I definitely want to keep going through the backlist of classics that I haven't read, because I know there are some gems in there, even if this one wasn't really for me. Thank you for watching. This video was made possible by the Gumption Club, who tip me per video so they can keep happening. That's nice. If you like this video, you might like any of these videos that I've made recently. I upload every Monday, so press that subscribe button and do stick around. Frog snog, oot.